and spawning over here as the devilishly handsome teal Terran in the bottom right-hand corner, representing Team Eli, we have LemonyTang. He is going to be facing off against the Red Zerg player from none other than Roar Gaming in the top left-hand corner of Star Station, rather rudely interrupting the beautiful design of this map with creep spread, but I guess that can't be helped. It is Jamesykins.
Even creep spread is prettier though in Heart of the Swarm. Like, have you had the chance to notice the new creep spread animation?
Oh yes, I have actually. Yeah, it actually looks quite fun. It looks like a little mini roller coaster on creep every time it spreads.
It's brilliant. I love it. It's little things like that, and I know this sounds really silly, but as exciting as all the new units are and the new strategies and the balance adjustments, etc., I think for a viewer experience, and let me know in chat what you think as well, but I think the physics engine improvement is probably the thing I've been most excited about, because doing lots of casting, there's something satisfying about seeing a Widow Mine hit a Stalker and the Stalker go flying halfway across the map.
Oh my, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The most impressive thing I've seen so far, and I hope you guys agree as well at home watching the stream, are the ragdoll physics in Heart of the Swarm. I love... It sounds a little bit morbid, but I love knowing that when I kill someone else's unit, that it can die in one of about 17 different ways, and all of them will be aesthetic.
Just like, I want to know it's definitely dead. Like, I want to actually, I want to see the pain in its eyes.
Exactly, it sure is dead now. And I've actually really enjoyed that, especially casting games. Obviously, you don't have as much time to appreciate things like this when you're playing yourself. But this kind of thing makes me happier to be in the game and casting it as well. And hopefully makes you guys happier to be watching it. I think Blizzard have done a tremendous job improving the physics in Heart of the Swarm. And hopefully that success will continue after the official release.
I hope it does. I think it will. I mean, if games continue like we've been seeing now, how can you not love this? It's.
I just want to stop you there. Someone in chat called Poopa Scoop, of all things, just said death animations are sick. And I'm wondering if the pun was intended.
It must have been.
It must. Oh, dear. They are pretty sick, though. Like,
the trouble is, if I come up with that pun as well, I would have said it and then started laughing to myself for a while. That would have been the downside. But coming back to the game, so far, what we are seeing is that LemonyTang has taken his expansion, he's built a bunker, and he's now getting up a factory and a reactor on the barracks to switch over to, I'm gonna go on a limb here, make some Hellions. Meanwhile for Jamesykins, he's got his natural up. He has now just taken his 2 gas, so he is getting his gas really starting relatively early, but he's getting his 3rd base as well, so we're not going to be seeing that 2 base roach play we've seen in games 1 and 4.
That's right, a relatively quick 3rd base here from Jamesykins. It must be because the place where he's taken it seems to have been blessed by some power or another. Overlord moving in above what I can only describe as a Protoss power plant or Death Star out on the right-hand side of the map. Going to be checking out the main base of LemonyTang very, very soon indeed. We have the first 2 Hellions on the way now. As we have, very nice SimCity as well, managing to put a couple of supply depots next to that bunker. But we should be seeing some early game aggression come out of LemonyTang very shortly indeed. And Jamesykins is about to spot that another factory is coming up with the tech lab on the barracks. That should probably indicate to him that Blue Flame is on the way.
Now, the one thing I will say for LemonyTang is, I don't know if you noticed it, but there was a double scan. There was a scan in the main and a scan at the natural. Yet again, as we've seen previously from Lemony, just to make sure that he's not going to be that roach push, because that's arguably what's caused him to lose the 2 games he's lost so far this series, is just because of that really early aggression. So he's making sure that, hey, I am actually safe and I can defend against this. So they're both in a good spot. We do have Blue Flame started now, as we knew would likely be coming. We've got a good number of Hellions coming across. The creep spread, though, very nice out of Jamesykins. And the one thing I'm so glad of this, he's made a wall off with that Rotron, double Evo, and the double Queen. I think he's finally realised that actually it's a problem. But is that a small gap? No, it's not. That's fine.
Oh,
is it?
No, I don't think so. Not quite. But I have to say, I've just come to a really cool realization as the Hellions actually go to work on the Larva at the 3rd base, because there aren't any workers there. When you get a lot of creep tumors spreading creep at the same time in Heart of the Swarm, dolphins swimming alongside a ship.
That is so true.
We're gonna have to keep an eye out on these active creep tumors now for when Jamesykins next spreads the creep. But I just saw him spread 6 creep tumors at once, and they actually look like dolphins. Oh, here we go. He's selecting them.
That is so awesome. I really hope I hope our observer and our streamer has the graphic settings up to max, because nothing would be more embarrassing for us than like he's put it like down to like make sure that it's a good frames per second or something, and none saw that and we were just getting hyped.
Ooh, a couple of roaches getting roasted in the middle of the map by Hellions. Not something you see an awful lot these days, but there are 9 of them left, so we can't afford to take out those roaches in small numbers. I have to say, LemonyTang hasn't been able to stop the creep spread so far, and actually once the Hellions are past that point, Jamesykins might be able to sneak in a couple of extra creep tumors if LemonyTang isn't careful, and he's doing a very good job of only creating roaches at his 3rd hatchery, denying the Hellions the opportunity to roast drones over there. So really good stuff there from Jamesykins, being very aware of what his opponent is doing and switching up what he's doing to compensate.
I think it's a good move. Clearly seeing that these roaches are a problem. He's already adapted his build by getting that SimCity wall off, which I think is very smart in its own right. Behind this, obviously, LemonyTang, he's got his 3rd command center up. He hasn't morphed it into an orbital yet. I'm assuming it's going to be an orbital. Obviously, it is slightly exposed, so... But there we go. So it is going to go down. I was thinking perhaps if he was going to go for something greedy, it might not be. But lots of Hellions. Medevacs here as well now. And, of course, Hellbats are biological. That's an important thing to note.
Ah, that's a pretty good point as well. So, of course, they can be healed by medevacs and all that good stuff. Will we see that come into use in this game? I'm not sure yet. He has done a good job of preserving all his Hellions, although once again I noticed that he's not really denying the creep spread here of Jamesykins. And another thing to point out as well from Jamesykins, a slight concern going later on into the game, he has made his lair at his 3rd base location. That's great because there are extra hit points against early attacks as roaches are now coming into the natural expansion of LemonyTang, but he also needs to be careful because later on in the game, if that becomes his high, for instance, it's very easy to pick that off once you get a nice Death Ball mech army.
It is indeed. Now, one little thing that was going on, we see, of course, these roaches in full retreat, but the drop was spotted by an Overlord just as it was on its way there. So already Jamesykins has pulled those roaches back, ready to deal with this 4 Hellion drop. Luckily for the Zerg in this situation. But if the drop comes down behind the mineral line and morphs into Hellbat, it could still get some good damage. Using the boost ability on the medevacs to get them in there ASAP. A couple of drones go down and 3 Hellions will live to tell the tale.
And I have to say, Battles, and I think this is actually quite important, that's the most prepared I've seen Jamesykins for a drop in this entire series. I think he's slowly starting to clue on to his opponent basically loves doing this harassment constantly all game long, and he needs to be ultra aware of these Hellion drops and run-bys throughout the entire course of the game, especially considering this is game number 5 and everything is on the line.
We do have another drop coming in towards the natural base, speaking of it, and of course the roaches are already there at the ramp between the main and natural, ready to start defending. A pickup goes down very quickly. The queens are trying to focus down the medevac. Meanwhile, in the main base, there's another drop going down, so simultaneous multi-prong dropping out of the Terran player. Really, I think this is clever for both of them. One, Jamesykins, for, as you say, preparing for it and making sure he's extra careful, but also by LemonyTang, identifying that, hey, this is potentially a weak spot in my opponent's play, that he hasn't been dealing with this drop well. I'm going to really try and utilize it and adjust my play to do it. But the drop play isn't just about the drops, as I'm sure you know. I'm just looking at these Hellions going...
Yeah, the 3 Hellions were targeting down an extractor for a little while. They might have been able to go in and roast some drones. Unfortunately, not going to be possible here. And 14 workers have been killed from LemonyTang, but on the flip side, Jamesykins has been relatively prepared for these drops in this game. The downside, of course, for Jamesykins is even though he's been dealing with the drops a little better, it's been taxing his multitasking because it's not something he's had to do normally in the previous game. So we actually see him down on worker supply at the moment. He's actually 55 to 71. He hasn't been droning up quite as hard. We can see that he hasn't actually been spreading his creep either. So he's obviously been focusing a lot of his attention to denying these drops. And as a result, we're seeing small chinks in his armor in the other areas of his play. He's going to have 4 overlords worth of roaches.
Jorisa, sorry to interrupt you, but there is a 4 roach drop coming in to these 2 command centers being built right now. There's queens coming in. these two bases that LemonyTang was trying to sneakily take are getting taken out now, and there is nothing anywhere near in order to defend them. And that was a really big thing for LemonyTang. He was trying to take those because he was keeping his opponent so far back, but is this top left one going to survive? It hasn't been spotted, but of course, but now the tanks are moving forward. They're trying to hold these roaches back.
And the Hellions are coming back into the third base. 3 Hellions into the third. Jamesykins defending so well against the run-bys up until this point. Is he going to be able to defend more? We have another drop going into the natural as well. 4 more Hellions, but there are already roaches and a queen in place. The third base, though, gets more or less obliterated, and the number of workers killed is jumping up to 30. Now, it has to be said, Jamesykins is maxed out at the moment, so even though he's only on 42 workers, he does have a scary number of roaches out right now. The drop going down in the main base of LemonyTang. He can afford for those units just about to be picked off as long as he does a decent amount of damage, maybe picking off a couple of tanks. He needs to find an attack, he needs to break through right now, and he really needs to spot that base on the bottom left as well. He doesn't want to leave that unchecked too long.
It's all part of his plan, though, Jorasar, because he's got roaches trying to run in. He's going to pick off these tanks, which have been left on their own. Meanwhile, another drop is going in, but of course, a lot of missile turrets are there.
Oh my God.
This is really quite tough for LemonyTang. He's getting a taste of his own medicine. Drop coming down everywhere. The roaches are in the main base. They are starting to pick things off, and luckily, well, a couple of the tanks were taken out at the front there. But my goodness, this was Jamesykins trying to play LemonyTang at his own game.
I have to disagree with one thing just there. Admittedly, I think the camera went off just as you said it. The roaches that were coming in to pick up the tanks on their own, there were 7 or 8 tanks clumped up there, Maddles, and even though they were left on their own, by the time the roaches got to within shooting range, half of them were dead. The roaches in the main base did a decent amount of damage to LemonyTang and camped out the production structures for a little while, but the ones in the middle of the map got completely annihilated by those tanks, even though most of them died, and as a result, he dropped from max supply. He's all the way down now to 120, and LemonyTang, with that base in the bottom left of the map, now starting to mine gas to supplement his income as well. He's up to 172 supply, and I think he's in a really good position.
He is in a good position now, and I didn't actually catch those tanks. I just flicked back to the main, but of course, looking now, this is always a dangerous spot. That third base of Jamesykins is going to be in some problems if these tanks get a good siege, the fourth base rather, if the tanks get a good siege up between the natural and fourth, and that is precisely what LemonyTang seems to be planning on doing. He's scanning, trying to push back the creep. He's got a nice long siege line in production, and with the Banshees there and the Thors and the Hellbats, Jamesykins is going to have to defend this very, very well.
Oh, with some roaches coming in from the back, picking off the tanks that were initially sieged up. LemonyTang doing a good job of sieging his tanks in a staggered fashion, but losing about half of them to the roaches that come in from the back. Now, Jamesykins does have the Spire that just completed, so if he perhaps sends in some roaches and things to try and pick off the Thors while coming in with some Mutalisks, he can feasibly push this back, but he needs to be very, very careful indeed, and oh, unfortunate. Coming in with the Infestors, trying to put some Infested Terrors next to the tanks, but the Infestors themselves are a little bit too close, and the splash damage from the tanks take them out. Jamesykins is really thrashing about here, trying to prevent this push from being successful. More tanks coming in from LemonyTang, though, means it looks like he's going to take Game 5 with now a 100 supply advantage.
Indeed he does, and as you pointed out, when he made the lair at that third base position, if it became a hive, it would be incredibly vulnerable, and that is precisely what we're seeing. It does fall, and with that, Jamesykins is sent somewhat back to the dark ages of tech. He does still have his Spire up, but no greater Spire will be able to come down from that. He doesn't have an Ultralisk Cavern, and there is the GG, well played, and it does mean that LemonyTang takes this best of 5, 3-2, and these two really have given us an absolutely amazing